German Shepherd was hit by a car and left screaming. What the baby did next made everyone cry. What you're about to listen will leave you in tears. This incredible story of compassion and unexpected courage will touch your heart in ways you never thought possible. If this story moves you, please like, share, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The sun beat down mercilessly on the cracked asphalt of Highway 19, just outside the bustling town of Pinewood. Cars whizzed by at dangerous speeds, their drivers focused solely on reaching their destinations, oblivious to the world around them. Among the weeds and discarded trash that littered the roadside existed a shadow, a forgotten soul that had learned to become invisible to survive. A thin German shepherd with matted fur, the color of desert sand, moved cautiously along the edge of the highway, his ribs pressed against his dirty coat, a testament to months of scavenging and hunger. No collar adorned his neck, no name belonged to him anymore. Those who noticed him at all simply called him that stray. On the rare occasions anyone bothered to acknowledge his existence. Rain had fallen the previous night, leaving small puddles where the dog now stopped to lap up water, his parched tongue working desperately to quench his thirst. His eyes, once bright with the intelligence characteristic of his breed, now carried a wary, distant look, the gaze of an animal that had been betrayed by the world of humans. For 6 long months, the nameless shepherd had survived on scraps pilfered from the overflowing dumpster behind Max's Gas and Go, a rundown service station that marked the last outpost before the highway stretched into miles of nothingness. The night attendant, a teenager named Zach, occasionally tossed leftover hot dog buns or stale chips toward the dog, but never attempted to approach him. "That dog's been hanging around here since winter," Zach had told a customer once, shrugging as he rang up their purchase. "Somebody probably dumped him. Happens all the time out here." The shepherd had developed a routine of sorts. Each morning, he would emerge from the small den he'd created beneath an abandoned drainage pipe, shake the dew from his fur, and make his way along the highway's edge, always careful to maintain a safe distance from the rushing vehicles. He had learned the hard way that humans in cars showed no mercy to creatures like him. This particular morning, however, something disrupted his careful pattern. A rabbit darted across his path, triggering the hunting instinct that still lived somewhere deep in his DNA despite months of near starvation. The shepherd's muscles tensed, his focus narrowing to the small creature that represented a real meal, perhaps the first in weeks. Without thinking, driven by hunger and instinct, the dog lunged after the rabbit. His paws left the safety of the roadside gravel and hit the scorching asphalt of the highway. The rabbit disappeared into the brush on the opposite side just as the dog reached the center line. The squeal of tires came first, a piercing sound that split the humid morning air. The shepherd turned his head toward the noise, time slowing in that moment as he saw the blue sedan barreling toward him, its driver's face a mask of shock and panic. There was no time to run, no chance to escape what came next. The impact sent the dog's body flying through the air, a yelp of pain silenced by the force of metal against flesh and bone. He landed 20 feet away, his body sliding across the rough surface of the road, before coming to rest in a heap of broken fur and blood. The blue sedan never stopped. Its brake lights flashed briefly, a momentary acknowledgement of the collision before the car accelerated away, disappearing around the curve of Highway 19, leaving only a faint trail of dust in its wake. Pain unlike anything the shepherd had ever known flooded every nerve in his body. Summoning strength born of pure survival instinct, he dragged himself toward the edge of the road, using his front legs, leaving a dark smear of blood on the hot asphalt. Each movement sent waves of agony through his body, but some primal drive kept him moving, inch by agonizing inch, away from the danger of passing vehicles. A pickup truck slowed as it passed, its driver craning his neck to look at the injured animal before shaking his head and continuing on his way. A minivan swerved slightly to avoid the blood on the road, its passengers turning their heads away from the gruesome scene. No one stopped. The shepherd finally reached the tall grass at the roadside, collapsing into its relative coolness. Blood matted his fur, and his breathing came in ragged, shallow pants. One of his back legs was twisted at an impossible angle, and a gash across his side revealed white bone beneath torn flesh. The pain was so intense that it transcended physical sensation, becoming an all-encompassing reality. From deep within his chest came a sound, Not quite a bark, not exactly a howl, but a cry of pure suffering that carried across the highway. It was the sound of a creature who had known nothing but abandonment, now facing death alone on the side of a road where no one cared enough to stop. Cars continued to pass. The shepherd's cries went unheard, or perhaps more accurately, unheeded. His vision began to blur, consciousness slipping away like water through spread fingers. As darkness crept in from the edges of his awareness, the dog's head sank down onto the dirt, his cries gradually fading to whimpers, then to shallow, labored breathing. It seemed this would be his final resting place, forgotten in death as he had been in life, another nameless casualty of human indifference. The midday sun climbed higher, casting harsh shadows across the injured animal as time passed with excruciating slowness. Miles away, in a modest two-story home with blue shutters and a swing set in the backyard, the Collins family was preparing for their Sunday afternoon ritual. Lucy Collins tucked a strand of chestnut hair behind her ear as she placed the remains of a chocolate cake into a plastic container. "Marcus, have you got Aiden ready to go?" she called up the stairs, wiping her hands on the floral apron she wore over her sundress. "Almost," came the reply from her husband. "He's insisting on bringing that dinosaur book to show his grandpa." Lucy smiled, shaking her head. Their 5-year-old son's current obsession with prehistoric creatures had dominated family conversations for weeks. The house was littered with plastic dinosaurs of all sizes, and bedtime stories invariably featured T-Rexes and Triceratops rather than traditional fairy tales. Upstairs, Marcus Collins knelt in front of his son, helping the boy tie his sneakers. Aiden's face was a miniature version of his father's, with the same hazel eyes that seemed to notice everything, and the same thoughtful expression that often made him seem older than his years. "You sure Grandpa hasn't seen this book already?" Marcus asked, tapping the colorful cover of Dinosaurs of the World. Aiden shook his head solemnly, his dark curls bouncing with the movement. "No, Daddy, this is the one with the feathered dinosaurs that scientists just discovered. Grandpa needs to know about them." Marcus bit back a smile at his son's serious tone. "Well, then we definitely can't let Grandpa go another day without this crucial information, can we?" "It's very important," Aiden agreed, hugging the book to his chest as he stood. "Science doesn't wait for anyone." This was another of Aiden's phrases, picked up from the educational programs he watched with rapt attention. While other children his age were content with cartoons, Aiden preferred documentaries about animals, planets, and scientific discoveries. His kindergarten teacher had already mentioned that he asked questions none of her other students had ever posed. "Come on, science guy," Marcus said, lifting his son into his arms. "Mom's waiting, and you know how Grandma gets if we're late for Sunday lunch." Downstairs, Lucy had finished packing the small cooler they always brought for the 30-minute drive to her parents' house. Though they made this trip every Sunday, she still prepared as though they were embarking on a much longer journey, ensuring they had water bottles, snacks, wet wipes, and even a change of clothes for Aiden, just in case. "Got everything?" Marcus asked as he set Aiden down at the bottom of the stairs. Lucy did a quick mental inventory before nodding. "I think so. Mom texted that she's making pot roast, so we're in for a treat." Marcus patted his stomach. "Your mom's pot roast is the main reason I married you, you know?" "I thought it was my charming personality and stunning good looks," Lucy replied with a mock pout. "That too," Marcus laughed, leaning in to kiss her cheek. "But mainly the pot roast connection." Their easy banter was interrupted by Aiden tugging on his father's pant leg. "Daddy, can I bring Rex?" he asked, referring to the stuffed T-Rex that had been his constant companion since his 4th birthday. "Sure, buddy. Where did you leave him?" "On my bed. I'll get him." Aiden scampered back up the stairs before either parent could offer to retrieve the toy for him. "That kid has more energy than both of us combined," Marcus observed, helping Lucy carry the cooler and gift bag, a birthday present for Lucy's father, to their silver SUV parked in the driveway. Within minutes, they were all settled in the vehicle, Marcus behind the wheel, Lucy in the passenger seat checking her phone for last-minute messages from work. She was a pediatric nurse with an always-on mentality. And Aiden securely buckled into his booster seat in the back, Rex the dinosaur clutched in one hand and his precious book in the other. The drive to Lucy's parents' house took them through town, past the elementary school where Aiden would start kindergarten in the fall, beyond the community park with its recently renovated playground, and eventually onto Highway 19, the fastest route to the rural area where Lucy had grown up. Aiden gazed out the window as the familiar sights of town gave way to open fields and occasional farmhouses. The dinosaur book lay open on his lap, but his attention had shifted to the passing landscape. There was something about the vastness of open spaces that captivated the boy, perhaps the same quality that drew him to books about the universe and ancient creatures that roamed the earth millions of years ago. Lucy had turned on the radio, and a pop song filled the car. Marcus tapped his fingers against the steering wheel in time with the music, occasionally glancing in the rearview mirror to check on Aiden, who had grown uncharacteristically quiet. "Everything okay back there, buddy?" Marcus asked after several minutes of silence. Aiden nodded, his eyes still fixed on the window. "Just watching for interesting things." "Like what?" Lucy asked, turning slightly in her seat to look at her son. "Animals," Aiden replied simply. "There's so many hiding that people never see them." This was typical of Aiden, making observations that seemed beyond his years. Just last week, he had spent an hour in their backyard counting different types of birds that visited the feeder Lucy had installed at his request, carefully recording his findings in a notebook with his still developing handwriting. The family lapsed into comfortable silence again as the SUV cruised along Highway 19. The Sunday traffic was light, with only occasional vehicles passing in the opposite direction. The lunch at Lucy's parents' had been pleasant as always, filled with good food and family updates. Her father had been delighted with both his birthday gift, a new fishing rod, and Aiden's dinosaur book, which he studied with exaggerated interest to please his grandson. Now, with their stomachs full and a container of leftover pot roast and birthday cake in the cooler, the Collins family was heading home. Aiden had dozed off briefly but awakened as they turned onto Highway 19 for the return journey. The sun was beginning its slow descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the road and giving the landscape a golden glow that softened its edges. Lucy had switched the radio to a classical station, and the soothing strains of a piano concerto filled the car. They were approximately halfway home when Aiden suddenly sat upright in his seat, his stuffed dinosaur falling forgotten to the floor of the car. "Daddy, stop!" he cried, his voice sharp with urgency. "Stop the car!" Marcus glanced at the rearview mirror, startled by his son's outburst. "What's wrong, Aiden?" "Something's hurt. I heard it." The boy was now straining against his seatbelt, his face pressed to the window. "Please stop, Daddy." "Someone's crying." Lucy turned to look at her son with concern. "Honey, what are you talking about? I don't hear anything." "It's there," Aiden insisted, pointing toward the side of the road they had just passed. "Something's really hurt. It's screaming for help." Marcus exchanged a quick glance with Lucy, who shrugged slightly, her expression uncertain. Neither of them had heard anything unusual, but Aiden's distress was real and mounting by the second. "Please, Daddy," Aiden pleaded, tears now welling in his eyes. "We have to go back. We have to help." With a sigh, Marcus signaled and began to slow the SUV. "Okay, buddy, I'll pull over." "But there's probably nothing there." "There is," Aiden insisted, his small hands clenched into fists. "I heard it crying. It needs help right now." Marcus found a safe spot to turn around and doubled back, driving slowly along the shoulder of the highway. Lucy rolled down her window, listening intently, but heard nothing beyond the sound of their tires on the asphalt and the occasional rush of a passing car. "I don't hear anything, Aiden," she said gently, turning to look at her son. But Aiden was focused with an intensity rarely seen in a child his age. His whole body was tense, his head tilted slightly as though trying to catch a sound just at the edge of hearing. "Stop here," he said suddenly, his voice dropping to a whisper. "It's right there." Marcus pulled the SUV completely onto the shoulder and put it in park. The stretch of highway before them seemed unremarkable, just the endless ribbon of asphalt, bordered by tall grass and scattered trees in the distance. "Aiden, I really don't think," Marcus began, but stopped when he saw his son already unbuckling his seatbelt. "Hey, wait a minute, you can't just jump out?" But Aiden was overcome with a certainty that neither parent could understand. In his 5 years of life, he had never felt so sure of anything. Something was hurt, it was close, and it needed help immediately. The crying he had heard through the closed windows of the car had awakened. Something deep inside him, an instinct to protect that transcended his young age. Before either parent could stop him, Aiden had opened the car door and was running toward the tall grass at the roadside, his small legs carrying him with surprising speed. "Aiden!" Lucy cried out, her heart lurching with fear as she watched her son dash dangerously close to the highway. Both parents scrambled from the vehicle, panic rising as they raced after their child. Aiden disappeared into the tall grass, following a sound that only he could hear, a faint whimpering that called to him more clearly than his parents' alarmed shouts. He pushed through the scratchy stalks, ignoring the way they pulled at his clothes and skin. And then he saw it. Lying in a patch of flattened grass, partially hidden from the road, was a large dog, a German shepherd with blood-matted fur and eyes half-closed in pain. Its body was broken, one leg bent at a sickening angle, its breathing shallow and labored. Aiden froze, not from fear but from the overwhelming wave of sorrow that washed over him at the sight of such suffering. The dog's eyes flickered open at his approach, a low growl forming in its throat, the instinctive response of an injured animal expecting further harm. "Aiden!" Marcus's voice came from behind him, breathless with fear and exertion. "Get away from that!" The words died in his throat as he broke through the grass and saw what his son had found. Lucy appeared a moment later, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a gasp of horror. "Oh my God!" she whispered, reaching for Aiden's arm to pull him back. "Honey, come away from there. That dog is badly hurt and might be dangerous." But Aiden stood his ground, his eyes locked with the suffering animals. "He's not dangerous," he said with absolute conviction. "He's scared and really, really hurt. Someone hit him and didn't stop to help." The evidence of this assessment was all too clear. The trail of blood leading from the highway to the dog's current position, the tire marks on the asphalt nearby, the horrific injuries that could only have been caused by a collision with a vehicle. "We need to call animal control," Marcus said, already reaching for his phone. "They'll know what to do." "No!" Aiden's voice was surprisingly forceful. "They'll take too long. He needs help now." The dog had stopped growling, its eyes fixed on the small human who stood before it without fear. A whimper escaped its throat, a sound so filled with pain that it brought tears to Lucy's eyes. "Marcus," she said quietly, her nurse's training overriding her initial fear, "that dog is dying. Animal control won't get here in time." Aiden took a small step closer to the injured animal, ignoring his father's warning hand on his shoulder. "It's okay," he said to the dog, his voice suddenly soft and soothing. "We're going to help you. Nobody's going to hurt you anymore." The German shepherd's tail moved slightly. Not quite a wag, but the acknowledgement of the child's words. Its eyes, though clouded with pain, seemed to hold a glimmer of something that had been absent before, a tiny spark of hope. "He understands me?" Aiden whispered, looking up at his parents with tear-filled eyes. "We can't leave him here all alone." Marcus ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing through options. This wasn't how their peaceful Sunday drive was supposed to end. The injured dog looked like it needed immediate veterinary care, but moving a wounded animal that size would be challenging, not to mention potentially dangerous. "Lucy, what do you think?" he asked, deferring to his wife's medical background. Lucy knelt down, keeping a cautious distance from the injured shepherd. Her trained eye quickly assessed the visible wounds, the broken leg, the deep gash along the side, the labored breathing that suggested possible internal injuries. In humans, these would be critical conditions requiring immediate emergency care. She assumed the same applied to dogs. "It's bad, Marcus," she said quietly, trying to keep her voice calm for Aiden's sake. "Really bad. I'm not a vet, but those injuries..." She shook her head, leaving the grave prognosis unspoken. Marcus nodded, understanding the unfinished thought. "Aiden, buddy, this dog needs professional help. The best thing we can do is call someone who knows how to handle injured animals." But Aiden wasn't listening. He had inched closer to the German shepherd, moving slowly and deliberately, his small body tense with concentration. The dog's eyes followed his movement, a low whimper escaping its throat. "Aiden!" Lucy hissed, fear spiking through her. "Don't get any closer. That dog is in pain and scared. It might bite." The boy paused but didn't retreat. "He won't bite me, Mom. He's too tired." His voice held a certainty that bewildered his parents. He just wants someone to help him. Marcus moved forward to pull his son back, but froze when the dog's head lifted slightly, its gaze shifting from Aiden to him. There was no aggression in those eyes, only exhaustion and a profound suffering that made Marcus's chest tighten. In that moment, he saw beyond the blood and dirt to what must have once been a magnificent animal, intelligent, loyal, strong, the kind of dog that should have been running in a backyard with children, not dying alone on the side of a highway. "He needs water," Aiden said decisively. "Daddy, can you get some from the car?" Marcus hesitated, torn between the urgency of the situation and his instinct to protect his son from both physical harm and the emotional trauma of witnessing death up close. "Please, Daddy," Aiden pleaded, his eyes never leaving the shepherd. "He's really thirsty." With a resigned sigh, Marcus nodded. "Okay, I'll get some water, but you stay right where you are. Don't move any closer until I come back." As Marcus jogged back to the SUV, Lucy remained crouched nearby, her motherly instinct to protect her child, warring with her medical training that urged her to offer comfort to the suffering. "He's been here a long time," Aiden said softly, his eyes scanning the dog's thin body. "Look how skinny he is, Mom. I think he's been all alone." Lucy followed her son's gaze, noticing for the first time the protruding ribs beneath the matted fur, the calluses on paws that had walked too many miles, the old scars that spoke of previous hardships. This wasn't just an injured pet. This was an animal that had been surviving on its own for months, perhaps years. "I think you're right," she agreed, her heart aching at the thought of such abandonment. "He looks like he's been astray for quite a while." "What's astray?" Aiden asked, his vocabulary still expanding daily. "It means he doesn't have a home or a family to take care of him," Lucy explained gently. Aiden's face crumpled at this explanation. "That's really sad. Everyone should have a family." He looked back at the dog with renewed determination. "We're his family now." Before Lucy could formulate a response to this declaration, Marcus returned carrying a plastic container of water from their cooler. He approached cautiously, crouching beside Aiden. "Here you go, buddy," he said, handing the container to his son. "But let me help you. We don't want to scare him." Together, father and son moved slightly closer to the injured shepherd. The dog tensed, its body attempting to shift away, before a spasm of pain caused it to collapse back onto the grass with a heart-wrenching whimper. "It's okay," Aiden whispered, his voice taking on that same soothing quality that had surprised his parents earlier. "We're not going to hurt you. We just brought some water." Marcus held the container while Aiden carefully dipped his fingers into it and extended his wet hand toward the dog's muzzle. The shepherd's nostrils flared at the scent of water, and after a moment's hesitation, its dry tongue emerged to lick Aiden's fingers. "See?" Aiden said triumphantly. "He's not mean. He's just really hurt and scared." Encouraged by this small success, Marcus moved the container closer, allowing the dog to lap weakly at the water. The shepherd drank with desperate thirst, though even this simple action seemed to cause pain. Lucy had been using this time to search for emergency veterinary services on her phone. "The closest emergency vet is in Riverdale," she reported, "about 20 miles from here." "Call them," Marcus said, watching as the dog finished drinking. "See if they're open and what they recommend for transport." As Lucy made the call, Aiden sat cross-legged on the grass, just beyond the shepherd's reach. "What should we name him, Daddy?" he asked, as if the decision to take responsibility for the animal had already been made. Marcus started to explain that they couldn't just adopt an injured stray, but something in his son's expression, that mixture of compassion and determination that made Aiden uniquely himself, stopped him. Instead, he found himself considering the question. "Well, what do you think would be a good name?" Aiden tilted his head, studying the dog thoughtfully. "Something brave," he decided, "because he must be really brave to have been all alone and hurt like this." "That makes sense," Marcus agreed, surprised by the lump forming in his throat. "I think we should call him Warrior," Aiden announced, "because he's fighting really hard to stay alive." The name hung in the air between them, simple, powerful, oddly fitting for the broken creature before them. The shepherd's eyes, though clouded with pain, seemed to focus on Aiden as he spoke the name. "Warrior," Marcus repeated softly. "That's a good name, buddy." Lucy rejoined them, sliding her phone back into her pocket. "The emergency clinic is open. They say we need to get him there as soon as possible, but they warned about moving him without proper equipment." She hesitated, lowering her voice. "They also mentioned that treating a stray with severe injuries could be expensive." The unspoken question lingered between the adults. How much were they willing to invest in a dog that wasn't theirs, that might not even survive the journey to the clinic? As if sensing their hesitation, Aiden spoke up. "I have money in my dinosaur bank at home," he offered earnestly. "I've been saving for a new telescope, but Warrior needs it more." The simple generosity of this statement, from a child who had been counting his quarters and dimes for months toward a dream purchase, struck both parents silent. In that moment, the decision that had seemed so complicated became startlingly clear. "We'll figure out the money later," Marcus said firmly. "Right now, let's focus on getting Warrior to help." The practical challenge of moving an injured, unknown dog soon presented itself. The shepherd, Warrior, as they now called him, lay on the ground, his body tense with pain, his ability to move severely compromised. "We need something to carry him on," Lucy said, thinking aloud. "A board or something flat." Marcus glanced toward their SUV. "I've got that old picnic blanket in the back. Maybe we could use that as a stretcher?" "Good idea," Lucy nodded. "Aiden, you stay with Warrior while Dad and I get the blanket ready, okay?" Aiden nodded solemnly, accepting this important responsibility without hesitation. As his parents walked back to the car, he leaned slightly closer to the injured dog. "You're going to be okay," he promised in a whisper. "We're taking you to the doctor, and they're going to make you all better. Then you won't have to be alone anymore." Warrior's tail moved slightly against the ground, the barest suggestion of a wag, but a response nonetheless. His eyes remained fixed on Aiden, as if the boy represented his last hope, in a world that had shown him little kindness. From the SUV, Lucy watched this interaction with a mixture of concern and wonder. "Have you ever seen him like this?" she asked Marcus as he pulled the old blanket from the cargo area. "Like what?" "So, connected to an animal. It's like they understand each other." Marcus followed her gaze to where their son sat, speaking softly to the injured shepherd. "Aiden's always been good with animals. Remember how that neighbor's cat would always come to him, even though it hissed at everyone else?" "This is different," Lucy insisted. "It's like he heard that dog crying when we couldn't hear anything, and look how calm Warrior is with him, despite being in so much pain." They returned with the blanket spread between them. "Okay, buddy, we need you to move back so we can slide this under him," Marcus instructed. Aiden nodded and scooted backward, though he continued talking soothingly to Warrior. "They're going to put this blanket under you so we can carry you to our car. It might hurt a little bit, but I promise we're trying to help." The process of maneuvering the blanket beneath the injured dog was slow and difficult. Each movement caused Warrior to whimper or growl softly, his body trembling with pain. Lucy directed the effort, drawing on her medical training to minimize movement of the potentially broken limbs and spine. "Easy, easy," she murmured as they finally positioned the blanket. "Now we need to lift very carefully, keeping him as level as possible." Marcus took one end of the makeshift stretcher while Lucy took the other. Together, they raised it slowly, trying to keep the dog's body stable. Warrior let out a heart-wrenching yelp as he was lifted, his eyes rolling with panic and pain. "It's okay, Warrior," Aiden called, walking alongside the stretcher. "You're being so brave. We're going to get you help really soon." The shepherd's eyes found the boy again, and remarkably, his struggles lessened. Though clearly still in agony, he seemed to be making a conscious effort to remain still as they carried him toward the SUV. "How are we going to do this?" Marcus grunted, the weight of the large dog straining his arms. "He won't fit in the back seat with Aiden's booster." "We'll have to put the rear seats down," Lucy decided. "Make a flat space in the back. Aiden can sit up front with me." "I want to stay with Warrior," Aiden protested immediately. "Honey, it's not safe," Lucy began. "Please, Mom, he's scared. He needs me." Something in her son's pleading expression made Lucy reconsider. "Okay, but you'll have to wear your seatbelt, and you cannot touch Warrior while the car is moving. It could hurt him more if we have to stop suddenly." Aiden nodded eagerly, accepting these conditions without argument. With careful maneuvering, they managed to reconfigure the SUV's interior, creating a flat space where they gently placed Warrior on his blanket. Aiden scrambled in beside him, positioning himself where the dog could see him without having to move. Marcus closed the rear hatch and slid into the driver's seat. "Everyone set?" he asked, his voice tense with the stress of the situation. "We're ready," Aiden answered from the back. "Warrior says to please drive carefully because his leg really hurts." Lucy and Marcus exchanged a glance, both struck by their son's peculiar statement. as if he truly were communicating with the injured animal. "I'll be very careful," Marcus promised, starting the engine. "Lucy, can you call the vet again and let them know we're on our way?" As Lucy made the call, Marcus guided the SUV back onto Highway 19, driving well below the speed limit to avoid jostling their injured passenger. In the back, Aiden maintained a steady stream of gentle conversation with Warrior, his small voice offering reassurance with every mile that passed. "You're doing so good," he told the shepherd. "The doctor is waiting for you. They have medicine that will make the pain go away. And guess what? My mom is a nurse for kids, so she knows a lot about helping people feel better when they're hurt." Warrior lay motionless on the blanket, his breathing shallow but steady, his eyes rarely leaving Aiden's face. Occasionally, a particularly rough patch of road would cause him to whimper, and Aiden would immediately lean closer, though careful not to touch as promised, and whisper additional comforts. "The vet says they'll be ready for us," Lucy reported, ending her call. "They've got an emergency team waiting." She hesitated before adding, "They did ask about payment again." Marcus nodded grimly. "We'll figure it out. Maybe they have some kind of payment plan." From the back seat came Aiden's voice, still speaking to Warrior, but clearly intended for his parents as well. "Don't worry about money. My dinosaur bank has $37.22. I counted it yesterday. That's a lot of money, right?" The innocent question brought tears to Lucy's eyes. $37 would barely cover the initial examination fee, let alone treatment for the extensive injuries Warrior had suffered. But the generosity behind the offer, the willingness of a 5-year-old to give up his precious savings, was overwhelming. "That's very generous, buddy," Marcus said, his own voice slightly hoarse. "We'll see what the vet says first, okay?" The remainder of the drive passed in tense silence, broken only by Aiden's continued reassurances to Warrior and the occasional directions from Lucy's GPS. After what seemed like hours but was actually just under 20 minutes, the illuminated sign of the Riverdale Emergency Veterinary Clinic came into view. Marcus pulled into the parking lot and stopped near the entrance. "I'll go let them know we're here," Lucy said, already opening her door. She returned moments later with 2 veterinary technicians and a rolling gurney. With professional efficiency, they opened the SUV's rear hatch and assessed the situation. "This is bad," one technician murmured to the other. "Multiple fractures, possible internal bleeding." "Can you help him?" Aiden asked, his small face appearing between the front seats. The technician's expression softened at the sight of the worried child. "We're going to do our very best," she promised. "What's your dog's name?" "Warrior," Aiden answered without hesitation. "Because he's really brave." "That's a perfect name," the technician agreed. "Now, we need to get Warrior inside so the doctor can help him. Can you be brave too and wait with your parents while we take him?" Aiden nodded solemnly, though his lower lip trembled as he watched the technicians carefully transfer Warrior to the gurney. The shepherd's eyes sought him out one last time before he was wheeled rapidly through the clinic's automatic doors, disappearing from view. Inside the waiting room, a receptionist with a sympathetic smile guided them to a cluster of chairs in the corner. "The doctor will come speak with you as soon as she's assessed him," she explained. "In the meantime, I'll need to get some information." Marcus sat down beside her desk to provide what little he knew about Warrior, while Lucy and Aiden settled into the waiting area chairs. The bright fluorescent lighting made the room feel stark and sterile, a sharp contrast to the natural setting where they'd found the injured dog. "Is Warrior going to die?" Aiden asked suddenly, his voice small but clear in the quiet room. Lucy's heart clenched at the direct question. She believed in being honest with her son, but how honest should she be about a situation this grave? "I don't know, honey," she finally answered. "His injuries are very serious. The doctors here will do everything they can to help him, but sometimes injuries can be too severe to fix." Aiden absorbed this information, his hazel eyes thoughtful. "But sometimes people get really hurt and the doctors save them, right? Like that time when Grandpa had his heart attack and went to the hospital." "That's true," Lucy acknowledged. "Medicine can do amazing things." "Then we just have to believe they can help Warrior too," Aiden decided, his expression setting into lines of determination that made him look startlingly like his father. Marcus rejoined them, sitting heavily in a chair across from Lucy. "They're working on him now," he reported. "The initial exam doesn't look good, but they won't know the full extent until they get some x-rays." "And the cost?" Lucy asked quietly. Marcus shook his head slightly. "We'll talk about that later," he murmured, with a meaningful glance toward Aiden. Time crawled by in the waiting room. Aiden, usually so full of energy and questions, sat unusually still, his dinosaur book open but unread on his lap. His parents took turns getting up to stretch their legs or refill their water cups from the cooler in the corner, but Aiden refused to move from his chair, as if afraid Warrior might need him at any moment. After nearly an hour, a door opened and a woman in scrubs appeared. "Collins family?" she called. They stood, Aiden scrambling to his feet so quickly he dropped his book. "I'm Dr. Patel," the veterinarian introduced herself. Her face was serious but kind as she looked between the three of them. "Let's talk about Warrior." Dr. Patel led them to a small consultation room with a round table and several chairs. Once they were seated, she opened a folder containing several X-ray images that she placed on the table before them. "Warrior has sustained extremely serious injuries," she began frankly. "He has a fractured pelvis, a compound fracture of the right rear leg, 3 broken ribs, and internal bleeding that we're working to control." She pointed to each injury on X-rays as she spoke. "Additionally, he's severely malnourished and has several older injuries that have healed improperly, suggesting he's been on his own for quite some time." "But can you fix him?" Aiden asked, his eyes fixed intently on the doctor's face. Dr. Patel smiled gently at the boy. "We're trying, Aiden. Warrior is in surgery right now. Our team is working very hard to repair the worst of the damage." "Will he be okay?" Aiden pressed, needing a more definitive answer. The veterinarian's expression became more guarded. "I wish I could promise you that, but I have to be honest. His injuries are life-threatening and his condition is critical. The next 24 hours will be crucial." Aiden seemed to digest this information, his small face screwing up with the effort of processing such difficult concepts. "Can I see him?" he finally asked. "I think he'd feel better if he knew I was here." Dr. Patel's expression softened further. "Not right now, while he's in surgery, but perhaps later, if he stabilizes." The conversation shifted to the difficult topic that Marcus and Lucy had been avoiding: the cost of treatment. Dr. Patel explained the estimated expenses for Warrior's emergency surgery, overnight intensive care, medications, and follow-up treatment. The total made Lucy's breath catch and Marcus's shoulders tense. "I understand this is a significant amount, Doctor," Patel said gently, "especially for a dog you just found. We do have payment plans available, and there are some rescue organizations that sometimes help with emergency medical costs for strays." Marcus and Lucy exchanged a look, a silent communication built over years of marriage and parenting. Both knew that taking on this financial burden for a stray dog they'd literally just found was objectively unwise. They had their own expenses: Aiden's upcoming school needs, the roof repair they'd been putting off, Lucy's student loans that still weren't paid off. "I need to discuss this with my wife," Marcus said finally. Dr. Patel nodded understandingly. "Of course. I'll give you some privacy. The receptionist has the paperwork when you're ready." She patted Aiden gently on the shoulder before leaving the room. "You're very brave, just like Warrior." Once the door closed behind the veterinarian, Marcus turned to Lucy. "It's a lot of money," he said quietly. "I know," Lucy agreed, glancing at Aiden, who was studying the X-rays still laid out on the table, his small finger carefully tracing the outline of Warrior's broken bones. "We could maybe put it on the credit card," Marcus suggested, though his expression showed his reluctance. "Or I could see if I can pull from my 401k. Lucy bit her lip. "That's for emergencies, Marcus." "Isn't this an emergency?" he countered, gesturing toward the consultation room door, beyond which Warrior was fighting for his life. "For a dog we don't even know, that we found an hour ago, be reasonable." Lucy kept her voice low, though it was clear she was struggling with the decision herself. Her medical training inclined her toward helping those in suffering, but her practical nature couldn't ignore the financial reality. Aiden looked up from the X-rays, his eyes moving between his parents. Though they were trying to shield him from the details of their conversation, he understood the essentials. Money was a problem, and it might mean Warrior wouldn't get the help he needed. "I meant what I said," he interjected, his voice small but determined. "You can have all my money from my dinosaur bank, and my birthday money from Grandma, and I don't need any Christmas presents this year. The simple offering, so inadequate to the actual cost yet so enormous from a 5-year-old's perspective, hit both parents like a physical blow. "Oh, buddy," Marcus said, his voice rough with emotion. "That's really generous of you, but this is a lot more money than what's in your dinosaur bank." "How much more?" Aiden asked practically. Marcus hesitated, then decided honesty was best. "About 100 times more." Aiden's eyes widened, trying to grasp such a sum. "That's a lot," he admitted, "but Warrior needs it. He doesn't have anybody else." Lucy moved to sit beside her son, wrapping an arm around his small shoulders. "Honey, sometimes we have to make really hard choices. We want to help Warrior, but we have to think about our family too." "Warrior is family now," Aiden stated with the absolute certainty only a child could muster. His eyes, so like his father's, were steady and clear as he looked up at his mother. "You always say we help family no matter what." Lucy felt tears welling in her eyes. She did say that, had repeated it countless times as a core value of their household. How could she contradict it now, when it most mattered? Marcus watched this exchange, his own internal conflict evident on his face. Then, with sudden resolution, he stood. "I'm going to talk to the receptionist about the payment plan." "Marcus," Lucy began, her practical side still hesitating. "We found him for a reason, Luce," Marcus interrupted gently, "and I'm not ready to teach our son that compassion has a price limit." With that, he left the consultation room, leaving Lucy and Aiden alone with the disturbing X-ray images of Warrior's broken body. Aiden leaned against his mother, suddenly looking tired, the emotional toll of the afternoon catching up with his 5-year-old stamina. "Warrior's going to make it," he murmured. "I can feel it." Lucy pressed a kiss to the top of his head, marveling at her son's unwavering conviction. "I hope you're right, sweetheart." The next few hours passed in a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and tense waiting. Marcus had arranged a payment plan with the clinic, putting a substantial deposit on their credit card and committing to monthly payments that would stretch their budget thin for the foreseeable future. Lucy had called her parents to explain why they wouldn't be home for dinner, giving a condensed version of the afternoon's events. "You're doing what?" Lucy's mother had exclaimed when told about the financial commitment they were making to save the stray dog. "I know it sounds crazy, Mom," Lucy had admitted, stepping outside the clinic to take the call while Marcus stayed with Aiden in the waiting room. "Maybe it is, but you should have seen Aiden with this dog. There's something special happening there." Now, as evening fell outside the clinic windows, the Collins family remained in the waiting room. Aiden had finally dozed off, curled awkwardly across 2 chairs with his head on Marcus's lap. Lucy scrolled through her phone, canceling their Monday morning commitments and researching care for injured dogs, her practical nature already planning for a future that included Warrior in their home. If he survived. The thought caught her off guard. When had she moved from reluctant participant to active planner? Somewhere in the last few hours, Lucy realized, she had crossed over from viewing this as her son's crusade to accepting it as a family decision. Perhaps it was Aiden's unwavering certainty, or Marcus's quiet determination to do what felt right despite the cost. Or perhaps it was her own instinct as a nurse that rebelled against leaving any living being in pain. Collins family? Lucy looked up to see Dr. Patel standing in the doorway that led to the treatment area. The veterinarian looked tired, with surgical scrubs now replacing the professional attire she'd worn earlier. Marcus gently shifted Aiden, who blinked awake, immediately alert. "Is Warrior okay?" he asked, rubbing his eyes as he sat up. Dr. Patel came to sit on the coffee table directly across from them, a position that put her at eye level with Aiden. "Warrior is out of surgery," she began cautiously. "We've stabilized the internal bleeding and set his broken bones. But he's very weak, and the next 12 hours will be critical." "But he's alive," Marcus clarified. "Yes, he's alive," Dr. Patel confirmed. "He's a fighter, that's for sure. Many dogs with these injuries wouldn't have made it this far." "Can I see him now?" Aiden asked, his voice trembling slightly with hope and fear. Dr. Patel hesitated, clearly weighing hospital policy against the pleading expression on the child's face. "Normally, we don't allow visitors in the recovery area. Especially children," she began slowly. "But given the circumstances, I think a short visit might actually be beneficial. For both of you." Aiden's face lit up, but Dr. Patel quickly raised a cautioning hand. Just for a few minutes, and you'll need to be very quiet and gentle. Warrior is heavily sedated and has lots of tubes and equipment helping him. It might look scary. I won't be scared, Aiden promised earnestly. I just want him to know we're still here. Dr. Patel smiled faintly, then looked to Marcus and Lucy. One parent can come too, she offered. You go, Lucy told Marcus. I'll wait here and update my parents. Marcus nodded, taking Aiden's hand as they followed Dr. Patel through the door into the treatment area of the clinic. They passed several rooms with equipment and examining tables before reaching a quieter section marked Recovery. He's in here, Doctor, Patel said softly, pausing outside a dimly lit room. Remember, very quiet and no touching. He has stitches and IVs that we don't want disturbed. Aiden nodded solemnly, his small face set with determination. Marcus squeezed his son's hand, offering silent support. Dr. Patel opened the door, revealing a small room with various monitoring equipment surrounding a padded table. On the table lay Warrior, nearly unrecognizable beneath bandages, tubes, and wires. His damaged leg was stabilized in a temporary cast, his body wrapped in places where surgery had been performed. An IV drip fed into a shaved patch on his front leg, and a screen nearby displayed his vital signs in a series of beeping lines and numbers. Aiden's step faltered momentarily at the sight, his eyes widening at the clinical reality of Warrior's condition. But after that brief hesitation, he moved forward with quiet purpose, approaching the edge of the table where Warrior's head rested. The dog's eyes were closed, his breathing shallow but steady. Beneath the harsh clinic lights and medical equipment, he appeared even more fragile than he had by the roadside. Smaller somehow, more vulnerable. Hi, Warrior, Aiden whispered, his voice barely audible above the soft beeping of the monitors. It's me, Aiden. I came to see you like I promised. At the sound of the boy's voice, something remarkable happened. Though heavily sedated, Warrior's ear twitched slightly, and his eyelids fluttered, not quite opening, but clearly responding to the familiar voice. Dr. Patel, observing from the doorway, raised an eyebrow in surprise. That's interesting, she murmured to Marcus. He's under pretty heavy sedation. He shouldn't be responsive at all. Marcus watched as his son continued to speak softly to the injured dog, using the same gentle, reassuring tones he'd used by the roadside. With each word, Warrior's readings on the monitor seemed to stabilize slightly, his heart rate evening out, his oxygen levels improving incrementally. You're doing so good, Aiden was saying. The doctors fixed your broken parts, and now you just have to rest and get strong again. We're going to take care of you forever, so you don't have to live by the road anymore. Warrior's tail, one of the few parts of him not bandaged or connected to equipment, moved almost imperceptibly, the barest twitch in response to the child's voice. Did you see that, Dad? Aiden whispered excitedly. He heard me. He knows we're here. Marcus nodded, unable to speak around the lump in his throat. There was something profoundly moving about his son's unwavering compassion and the broken dog's response to it. A connection that transcended words or logical explanation. Dr. Patel checked her watch reluctantly. I think we should let him rest now, she said gently. You can come back tomorrow if he's stable. Promise? Aiden asked, his eyes still fixed on Warrior. Promise, Dr. Patel confirmed. You've been a big help, Aiden. I think Warrior is calmer just knowing you're here. I told him I wouldn't leave him alone, Aiden explained seriously. And I meant it. As they prepared to leave, Aiden leaned as close to Warrior as he could without touching him. I have to go now, he whispered, but I'll be back tomorrow. Just keep fighting, okay? We're waiting for you. In what seemed almost too perfect to be coincidence, Warrior's monitor gave a stronger beep, as if in acknowledgement of the boy's words. On the drive home that evening, the Collins family was unusually quiet. The events of the day had left them emotionally drained and contemplative. Aiden dozed in his car seat, exhausted by the intensity of the experience. Lucy reached over to take Marcus's hand across the center console. Did we do the right thing? She asked softly, the question that had been hanging between them finally voiced. Marcus glanced in the rearview mirror at their sleeping son before answering. Honestly, I don't know, he admitted. Financially, probably not, but in every other way that matters. He squeezed her hand. Yeah, I think we did. Lucy nodded, resting her head against the passenger window. What if he doesn't make it? Aiden will be devastated. Then we'll help him through it, Marcus said simply. Either way, I think he's learning something important about compassion and courage. That's worth the cost. The next morning brought the challenge of explaining to Aiden why he couldn't go straight to the veterinary clinic. It was Monday, and both Marcus and Lucy had work obligations they couldn't reschedule. "But I promised Warrior I'd come back," Aiden protested, his lower lip trembling as he sat in his dinosaur pajamas at the breakfast table. "And you will," Lucy assured him, pouring cereal into a bowl. "But first, Daddy has to go to work, and you're going to spend the morning with Mrs. Peterson next door. Then, after lunch, I'll pick you up and we'll go see Warrior together." "But what if he needs me before then?" Aiden's concern was palpable, his breakfast untouched. Marcus, straightening his tie before heading to the office, knelt beside his son's chair. "Remember what Dr. Patel said? Warrior needs lots of rest to heal. This morning, he'll probably be sleeping and getting more medicine. By the time you see him, he might be more awake and really need your company." This logic seemed to satisfy Aiden, though he remained subdued as he changed into his clothes and gathered his dinosaur book to take next door. Before leaving, he asked to call the clinic just to check. Lucy dialed the number, speaking briefly with a staff member before handing the phone to Aiden. "Hello, this is Aiden Collins," he said, with the careful formality of a child using a telephone. "I'm calling about my dog Warrior who had surgery yesterday." He listened intently to the response, his face serious. "Okay. Can you tell him I'm coming after lunch? Thank you very much." He handed the phone back to Lucy, looking slightly reassured. "The lady says Warrior had a comfortable night and his vital signs are stable," he reported, accurately repeating the medical terminology he'd heard. "That's good, right?" "That's very good," Lucy confirmed, impressed by her son's recall. "See, he's getting the care he needs, and we'll visit him soon." The morning crawled by for all three Collins family members, each distracted by thoughts of the injured shepherd waiting at the clinic. Marcus found himself unable to focus during his team meeting, his mind drifting to the X-rays of Warrior's broken bones. Lucy, usually meticulous in her charting at the pediatrician's office where she worked, had to correct several errors she'd made in patient notes. And Aiden, typically content to play for hours with Mrs. Peterson's granddaughter, kept asking for the time, counting down the minutes until his mother would pick him up. Finally, shortly after 1 o'clock, Lucy arrived at Mrs. Peterson's house. Aiden was waiting by the window, his face lighting up at the sight of her car. "Is it time? Can we go now?" he asked breathlessly as she came through the door. Lucy thanked their elderly neighbor for watching Aiden, then led her impatient son to the car. "Yes, we're going now. Dad's going to meet us there during his lunch break." The drive to the clinic seemed interminable to Aiden, who sat forward in his booster seat, as if the position might somehow speed their journey. When they finally pulled into the parking lot, he was unbuckling his seatbelt before Lucy had even shifted into park. "Wait for me," she reminded him firmly. "Remember, Warrior is still very sick and needs a calm environment." Aiden visibly composed himself, taking a deep breath, as he'd been taught to do when his excitement got too big to contain. "I'll be calm," he promised. "I just want to see him so much." Inside, they found Marcus already waiting in the reception area, having arrived just minutes before them. He greeted Aiden with a hug, lifting him up to his hip in a rare display. Usually their 5-year-old insisted he was too big for such treatment. "Any updates?" Lucy asked quietly. Marcus nodded, his expression cautiously positive. "The nurse said he had a stable night. They're actually a bit surprised by how well he's doing, given the extent of his injuries." Before they could discuss further, Dr. Patel emerged from the treatment area. She looked more rested than she had the previous evening, and she smiled when she saw Aiden. "There's my special visitor," she said warmly. "Someone's been getting more alert every time the staff mentions your name." Aiden's eyes widened. "Warrior knows I'm here?" "Dogs have an incredible sense of smell and hearing," Dr. Patel explained. "I think he started picking up signals as soon as you entered the building." She gestured toward the treatment area door. "Would you like to see him now? He's been moved from recovery to the ICU kennels, so it's a different setup than last night." Aiden nodded eagerly, reaching for both his parents' hands as they followed Dr. Patel through the door. The veterinarian led them to a quieter part of the clinic, where several large kennels lined the walls. Most were empty, but in one, lying on a padded bed surrounded by less intimidating equipment than the previous night, was Warrior. The difference in the dog's appearance was subtle but significant. While still heavily bandaged and connected to monitoring equipment, he seemed more present, his eyes half open, his breathing deeper and more regular. When he caught sight of Aiden, his tail gave a definite thump against the padded bedding. "Warrior!" Aiden exclaimed, his voice hushed but vibrant with excitement. "You're awake." Dr. Patel opened the kennel door. "You can go in and sit with him if you'd like. Just be careful not to disturb his IV or bandages." Aiden looked to his parents for permission, and at their nod, stepped carefully into the large kennel. He sat cross-legged on the floor beside Warrior's bed, at eye level with the injured dog. "I told you I'd come back," he said simply. Warrior's response was immediate and unmistakable. Despite his injuries and the sedative effects of his pain medication, he lifted his head slightly, his eyes focusing on Aiden with clear recognition. His tail moved again, a weak but deliberate wag that brought tears to Lucy's eyes. "I've been a veterinarian for 15 years, Dr. Patel said quietly to Marcus and Lucy as they watched this reunion. "And I've never seen anything quite like the connection between your son and this dog. It's as if they've known each other forever." Lucy thought of Aiden's insistence that he'd heard Warrior crying when neither adult could hear anything, of the immediate trust that had formed between boy and dog, despite the circumstances. "I think there's something special happening here," she agreed, echoing the words she'd said to her mother the night before. "The technical term is interspecies empathy," Dr. Patel explained. "Some people, especially children, seem to have an enhanced ability to connect with animals. But this?" She gestured toward the kennel, where Aiden was now softly reading from his dinosaur book to an attentive Warrior. "This is exceptional." Over the next few days, a routine formed around Warrior's recovery. Marcus would drop Aiden at the clinic on his way to work, where the boy would spend an hour with the injured dog before Mrs. Peterson picked him up for their usual child care arrangement. Lucy would visit during her lunch break, bringing updates and sometimes small treats that Dr. Patel had approved for Warrior's diet. In the evenings, the whole family would return, often staying until closing time. The clinic staff, initially cautious about having a 5-year-old spend so much time with a critically injured animal, soon came to anticipate Aiden's visits. They noticed that Warrior's vital signs improved markedly during the child's presence. His pain seemed more manageable, his rest more peaceful, his progress more rapid than expected. "It's the darndest thing," one of the veterinary technicians commented to Lucy during her Wednesday lunch visit. "We'll check his stats, and they'll be decent. Then your son arrives, and 30 minutes later, everything's optimal. The doctor says she's never seen recovery indicators fluctuate so consistently with a visitor's presence." By Thursday morning, the 4th day since the roadside rescue, Dr. Patel had news for the Collins family that left them speechless. "His recovery is outpacing all our projections," she told them during their morning visit, reviewing Warrior's latest charts. "The internal bleeding has completely resolved, infection risks are minimal, and he's maintaining hydration and nutrition levels that indicate his body is actively healing." She shook her head in amazement. "Frankly, it's remarkable. Dogs with this severity of trauma typically take weeks to reach the stage he's achieved in days." "So he's going to be okay?" Aiden asked, his face lighting up with hope. Dr. Patel smiled at him. "It certainly looks that way. However," her expression grew more serious as she turned to Marcus and Lucy. "We need to discuss his ongoing care and prognosis." While Aiden returned to Warrior's kennel with a clinic assistant doctor, Patel led Marcus and Lucy to her office to talk privately. "Warrior is indeed making an incredible recovery," she began once they were seated. "But there are long-term considerations you should understand." She pulled up X-ray images on her computer screen, pointing to the complex fracture in the dog's rear leg. "This break was severe. We've stabilized it with pins, but there's significant damage to the surrounding tissue and nerves." "What does that mean for his recovery?" Lucy asked, her nurse's mind already cataloging potential complications. "It means he'll likely never have full function in that leg," Dr. Patel explained gently. "Best case scenario, he'll walk with a permanent limp. Worst case, he may need a canine wheelchair or even amputati. On if complications develop." Marcus and Lucy exchanged a concerned glance. They had known Warrior's injuries were severe, but hearing the long-term implications made the reality more concrete. "Additionally," Dr. Patel continued, "given his history as a stray and the evidence of previous untreated injuries, there may be behavioral considerations. While he's been remarkably docile here, that could be due to his weakened state and medication, As he regains strength, he might exhibit fear, aggression, or other trauma responses. But he's so gentle with Aiden, Lucy pointed out. Dr. Patel nodded. Yes, that relationship appears to be extraordinary, but introducing him to a home environment with new stimuli and potentially triggering situations could reveal different aspects of his personality. What are you saying exactly? Marcus asked, though he suspected he knew where this conversation was heading. Dr. Patel leaned forward, her expression compassionate but direct. I'm saying that taking on Warrior's long-term care will involve significant commitment, financially, emotionally, and practically. While he's thriving now under intensive medical care and your son's remarkable influence, the road ahead includes physical therapy, possible additional surgeries, behavioral training, and accommodation for permanent disability. She paused. Some families find that beyond their capacity, and that's completely understandable. Are you suggesting we shouldn't take him home? Lucy asked, tension evident in her voice. Not at all, Doctor. Patel clarified quickly. I'm simply fulfilling my professional obligation to ensure you have complete information before making a long-term commitment. There are wonderful rescue organizations that specialize in special needs dogs if that's a better option for your family. Marcus sat back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. How much time do we have to decide? At his current rate of improvement, Warrior could be ready for discharge early next week, Dr. Patel answered. Obviously, we won't release him until we've discussed a comprehensive care plan with whoever will be taking responsibility for him. The conversation continued for several more minutes, covering specifics about home care requirements, medication schedules, and follow-up appointments. Throughout, Marcus and Lucy listened attentively, asking practical questions while avoiding the underlying decision that loomed over the discussion. When they rejoined Aiden in Warrior's kennel, they found their son sitting on the floor with the German Shepherd's head resting gently in his lap. The dog's eyes were closed in what appeared to be peaceful sleep, while Aiden quietly read from his dinosaur book, one hand softly stroking behind Warrior's ear in a careful rhythm that avoided the healing cuts on the dog's face. The scene crystallized something for both parents simultaneously. A recognition that some bonds transcend practical considerations and logical decision-making. The choice they thought they needed to make had perhaps been made the moment Aiden had insisted they stop the car on Highway 19. That evening, after Aiden had gone to bed, Marcus and Lucy sat at their kitchen table with mugs of tea, discussing Dr. Patel's warnings and the reality of bringing a special needs dog into their home. The backyard fence will need reinforcing, Marcus noted, making a list of necessary preparations. And we should probably get some kind of ramp for the back steps until he's stronger. Lucy added her own items to the list. We'll need to find a trainer who specializes in traumatized dogs, and reorganize the guest room downstairs so he doesn't have to navigate the stairs. She paused, looking up from the growing list. Are we crazy for doing this? We don't even know this dog, not really. Marcus considered the question. Maybe a little crazy, he admitted with a small smile. But I think Aiden knows him somehow. And after all we've invested, not just money, but emotionally, I can't imagine telling Aiden we're going to hand Warrior over to strangers. Me neither, Lucy agreed softly. I just want to be sure we're being responsible. Taking on an injured animal with special needs is a decade-plus commitment. So was having a child, Marcus pointed out. Yet here we are, figuring it out day by day. He reached across the table to take her hand. We'll make it work, and I think we'll all be better for having Warrior in our lives. Aiden certainly will. Lucy squeezed his hand, making her peace with the decision. Okay then. Operation Adopt a Three-Legged German Shepherd is officially underway. The following morning, they shared their decision with Dr. Patel, who seemed unsurprised but pleased. I thought that might be your choice, she said with a warm smile. Given the bond we've all witnessed, I think it's the right one. She provided them with resources for special needs dog equipment, recommended trainers, and a more detailed home care plan. With his current progress, I believe we can discharge him on Monday, she concluded. That gives you the weekend to prepare your home. When they told Aiden that Warrior would be coming home with them, his reaction was not the explosion of excitement they had expected. Instead, he nodded solemnly as if they were merely confirming something he had known all along. I already told him, Aiden explained matter-of-factly. He was worried about where he would go when he got better, so I promised him he was coming home with us forever. Lucy exchanged a glance with Marcus, once again struck by their son's unusual connection with the injured shepherd. "Well, now it's official," she said, ruffling Aiden's hair affectionately. "We have a lot to do to get ready for him." The weekend passed in a flurry of preparation. Marcus installed pet gates at strategic locations throughout the house, reinforced the backyard fence, and constructed a wooden ramp to cover the back steps. Lucy transformed the rarely used first-floor guest room into Warrior's recovery space, with a thick dog bed, water station, and easy access to the backyard. They stocked up on the special food doctor Patel had recommended, filled prescriptions for pain medication and antibiotics, and purchased a harness designed to support a dog with limited mobility. Aiden participated enthusiastically in the preparations, carefully selecting which of his stuffed animals Warrior could borrow, and drawing pictures to hang at dog eye level in Warrior's new room. On Sunday night, he could barely sleep, too excited about the homecoming planned for the following day. Monday morning finally arrived. Marcus had taken the day off work to help with the transition, and Lucy had arranged to come in late to her shift at the pediatrician's office. After breakfast, which Aiden barely touched due to excitement, they drove to the clinic for Warrior's discharge. The staff had prepared a small celebration with paw prints stamped on a going home certificate and a care package of essentials. Dr. Patel conducted a final examination, reviewing medication instructions one last time before officially releasing Warrior into the Collins family's care. "Remember, he'll need to be carried in and out for bathroom breaks for at least another week," she cautioned, "and the physical therapy exercises are crucial, twice daily, no exceptions." Lucy nodded, mentally adding these tasks to their already busy family schedule. "We've got it covered. Our neighbor Mrs. Peterson has even volunteered to help during the day when we're at work." With paperwork complete and instructions reviewed, the moment of departure finally arrived. Warrior had been fitted with a protective cone to prevent him from disturbing his stitches and a specialized harness that would allow Marcus to support his hindquarters when necessary. Despite these cumbersome additions, the dog's eyes were bright with alertness. His ears perked forward as Aiden approached to help with the homecoming. "Ready to go home, Warrior?" Aiden asked, kneeling to meet the dog's gaze. Warrior's response was unmistakable. His tail began to wag with more energy than they'd seen since the accident, and he made a valiant attempt to rise, though his injured leg couldn't yet bear weight. "Easy, boy," Marcus cautioned, quickly moving to support the dog with the handle on the harness. "We've got to take it slow." With careful coordination, they managed to get Warrior into the back seat of the SUV, where Aiden sat beside him for the journey home, maintaining a constant stream of reassurance and description of what awaited at their house. "You have your own special room with a really comfy bed," he explained seriously, "and a ramp so you don't have to use the stairs. And I picked some of my stuffed animals to keep you company when I'm at school. Not Rex, because he's my favorite, but you can have Spike the Stegosaurus and Blue the Velociraptor." Warrior listened to this monologue with apparent interest, his eyes rarely leaving Aiden's animated face. Though still weak and clearly in pain, despite medication, there was a new quality to his demeanor, a cautious optimism, as if he were daring to believe that this turn of events might be permanent. Arriving home presented a new challenge. Despite the harness, Warrior was a large dog, and maneuvering him from car to house required careful teamwork. Marcus ultimately carried him, while Lucy held doors open, and Aiden provided constant verbal support. "You're doing so good, Warrior," he encouraged as they slowly made their way to the prepared room. "Just a little bit further." Once settled on his new bed, Warrior seemed momentarily overwhelmed, his eyes darting around the unfamiliar space, his body tense beneath Marcus's steadying hand. This was the moment they had been warned about, the potential for fear or aggression in a new environment. Aiden, sensing the dog's anxiety, sat cross-legged beside the bed. "It's okay to be scared," he said softly. "This is all new, but it's your home now, and nobody's ever going to hurt you again or leave you alone." Something in the simple sincerity of these words seemed to reach Warrior. His tense muscles gradually relaxed, and he lowered his head to rest on his paws, a deep sigh escaping him as if releasing years of vigilance and fear. The first day at home established patterns that would carry them through the challenging weeks ahead. Warrior needed help with everything: eating, drinking, bathroom breaks, and his medication schedule required attention throughout the day and night. The family adapted quickly, with Lucy creating a chart on the refrigerator to track medications and exercises, Marcus handling the physical aspects of Warrior's care, and Aiden providing the emotional support that seemed as essential to recovery as any medical treatment. By Wednesday, a new milestone was reached. During his morning physical therapy session, as Marcus gently flexed and extended the healing leg, while Aiden provided encouraging commentary, Warrior made an unexpected effort to stand. "Look!" Aiden gasped, freezing in place as the shepherd gathered his 3 functional legs beneath him and pushed upward. "He's standing by himself!" Marcus quickly moved to support the harness handle, but Warrior seemed determined to manage independently. With trembling muscles but unwavering focus, he stood, unsteadily and favoring his injured leg entirely, but upright for the first time since the accident. "Good boy, Warrior," Marcus praised, unable to keep the emotion from his voice. "That's incredible." Warrior held the position for only a few seconds before sinking back down, exhausted by the effort. But the achievement electrified the household. Lucy was called at work to hear the news, and by evening they had sent video of a second successful standing attempt to Dr. Patel, who responded with delighted surprise. "This is weeks ahead of schedule," she texted back. "Whatever you're doing, keep it up." What they were doing, beyond the prescribed medical care, was simple but powerful. They were loving him. Aiden spent hours beside Warrior's bed, reading books, describing his day at Mrs. Peterson's, explaining dinosaur facts, or simply sitting in companionable silence with his hand resting gently on the dog's back. Lucy had begun bringing her laptop into Warrior's room in the evenings, working on nursing schedules while keeping him company. Marcus had taken to having his morning coffee sitting on the floor beside the dog bed, talking softly about inconsequential things as sunlight filtered through the window. These quiet moments of connection seemed to feed something in Warrior that had been starved for longer than his body had been deprived of proper food. Day by day, his eyes grew brighter, his responses more engaged, his personality emerging from beneath the layers of trauma and survival. A week after coming home, Warrior achieved another milestone that brought the entire family to tears. Aiden had been sitting with him after dinner, as was their routine, when he rose to fetch a different book from his room. As he headed for the door, a sound stopped him in his tracks, a soft whine from Warrior, followed by the unprecedented sight of the dog laboriously pushing himself upright and taking a single shaky step toward Aiden. "Mom! Dad!" Aiden called, his voice trembling with excitement. "Come quick!" Warrior's walking. Marcus and Lucy rushed to the room just in time to see Warrior take a second tentative step, his injured leg barely touching the ground but participating in the movement. The effort was clearly enormous, sweat visible on his coat despite the room's cool temperature, but his determination was unmistakable. "He's trying to follow you," Lucy whispered, her hand covering her mouth in astonishment. Aiden stood frozen, afraid to move lest he somehow disrupt this miraculous moment. "You can do it," he encouraged softly. "Just one more step." Warrior complied, his eyes locked on the boy as he managed a third shaky step before his strength gave out, and he sank to the floor, panting from exertion. Marcus was beside him instantly, checking to ensure he hadn't injured himself further, while Lucy grabbed her phone to document the achievement. Aiden dropped to his knees beside Warrior, careful not to jostle him, but unable to contain his joy. "You walked!" he exclaimed, his small face radiant with pride. "You're the bravest dog in the whole world, Warrior." Word of Warrior's remarkable recovery began to spread beyond the walls of the Collins home. It started with Dr. Patel, who asked permission to share Warrior's case with veterinary colleagues. She had documented the shepherd's progress with photos, videos, and detailed medical notes, creating a compelling case study in canine resilience. "This kind of recovery timeline is virtually unprecedented," she explained during Warrior's 2-week follow-up appointment, especially considering the severity of the initial injuries and his compromised state as a malnourished stray. Lucy, who had accompanied Warrior and Aiden to the appointment, smiled as she watched her son gently supporting the dog's harness while he demonstrated his improved walking ability for the veterinarian. "We can't take much credit," she admitted. "It's mostly Aiden. They have this connection that's, well, you've seen it yourself." "I have," Dr. Patel agreed, making notes as she observed Warrior's gait. "And I'd like to document it more thoroughly, with your permission. This could really help us understand the role of emotional support in physical recovery for traumatized animals. With the Collins family's consent, Dr. Patel began sharing videos of Warrior's progress on the clinic's social media pages. The first post, showing the initial roadside rescue juxtaposed with Warrior taking his first steps at home, garnered thousands of views overnight. Comments flooded in, with people moved to tears by the transformation and the obvious bond between the young boy and the injured dog. Local Boy Saves Abandoned Dog from Death's Door ran the headline in the Pinewood Gazette the following week. The small community newspaper had picked up the story from social media and sent a reporter to interview the Collins family. The article detailed Warrior's rescue, the family's decision to take responsibility for his care despite the challenges, and Aiden's extraordinary role in the dog's recovery. He heard him crying when no one else could, Marcus was quoted as saying. Something about their connection defies logical explanation. The story, accompanied by photos of Aiden reading to Warrior and helping with his physical therapy exercises, struck a chord in the community. Soon other local news outlets picked it up, and then regional ones. By the end of the third week after the rescue, the Collins family had declined interviews from 3 television stations and a national magazine. "It's getting a bit overwhelming," Lucy admitted to Dr. Patel during a phone consultation. "We appreciate the interest, but we're trying to maintain some normalcy for Aiden. He doesn't understand why everyone wants to talk about something that seems perfectly natural to him." "That makes sense, Doctor," Patel agreed. "But there's something powerful about this story that's resonating with people. Perhaps there's a middle ground, a way to share Warrior's journey that helps others without disrupting your family life." That middle ground materialized in an unexpected form. Emily Chen, the director of Rescue Paws, a regional animal welfare organization, reached out to the Collins family after seeing the news coverage. "We specialize in rehabilitation and placement of injured and traumatized dogs," she explained during their initial phone call. "While Warrior has clearly found his forever home, your story could help so many other animals in similar situations." Emily proposed a simple collaboration. The Collins family would share updates about Warrior's recovery journey through Rescue Paws' established social media channels, and in return, the organization would use the attention to fundraise for other animals needing emergency medical care. "People are already invested in Warrior's story," Emily pointed out. "By connecting it to our broader mission, we could channel that emotional response into practical support for other dogs who don't have an Aiden to champion them." Marcus and Lucy were receptive to the idea, especially when Emily assured them that their privacy would be respected. No home addresses published, no pressure for additional interviews, and complete control over what content was shared. "What do you think, buddy?" Marcus asked Aiden that evening, explaining the proposal in terms his 5-year-old could understand. "Would you and Warrior like to help other dogs who got hurt and don't have families yet?" Aiden considered this seriously, absently stroking Warrior's ear as the dog rested his head on the boy's lap, a position that had become their standard evening arrangement. "Like sharing his story so people will help them too," he clarified. "Exactly," Lucy nodded. "Miss Emily's organization helps lots of dogs who got hurt or lost, like Warrior was, but they need money for doctors and medicine. And we could help get them that money by telling people about Warrior." "That's right," Marcus confirmed. "People would see how Warrior is getting better and want to help other dogs do the same." Aiden was quiet for a moment, his young face thoughtful. "I think Warrior would like that," he decided finally. He wouldn't want other dogs to be sad and alone like he was. And so began the next chapter of Warrior's journey. With Emily's guidance, the Collins family shared weekly updates, photos of Warrior's improving mobility, videos of his physical therapy sessions with Aiden as his devoted assistant, stories of small victories like managing the stairs for the first time or barking at a squirrel in the backyard. Each post was paired with information about another animal in Rescue Paws' care who needed help, creating a direct connection between Warrior's inspiring recovery and actionable support for other animals. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Donations to the organization doubled, then tripled. Adoption inquiries surged, particularly for special needs animals that might previously have been overlooked. People keep saying that if Warrior could overcome such trauma, maybe they too can take on a dog with challenges, Emily reported during a visit to the Collins home 6 weeks after the rescue. She had brought a professional photographer to capture new images of Warrior, who was now able to walk short distances without his supportive harness, though his injured leg would always bear the scars of his ordeal. "It's the ripple effect of compassion," Lucy observed, watching as Aiden demonstrated for the photographer how he helped Warrior with his daily leg-strengthening exercises. One small decision to stop the car that day has somehow touched all these other lives. The most unexpected outcome of their collaboration with Rescue Paws came in the form of educational opportunity. A local elementary school principal, moved by the news coverage, reached out to ask if Aiden and Warrior might visit the school's first-grade classes for a special presentation on animal welfare and empathy. "Obviously, we'd need to ensure it's appropriate for Warrior's recovery stage," the principal clarified, "and it would be very low-key, just a chance for the children to learn about compassion through a real-life example they can relate to." Despite some initial hesitation about how Warrior might react to a classroom environment, the Collins family agreed to a trial visit, carefully planned with Dr. Patel's input on what activities would be safe for Warrior's still healing body. The visit exceeded all expectations. Warrior, now 2 months into his recovery, showed remarkable composure among the excited children. With Aiden by his side, explaining in his straightforward way how they had found Warrior and helped him heal, the shepherd remained calm and even seemed to enjoy the gentle attention from small hands under careful teacher supervision. "He likes when you scratch behind his ears," Aiden instructed the circle of cross-legged first graders. "But don't touch his back leg because it still hurts sometimes, even though it's much better than before." The children listened with rapt attention as Aiden explained how Warrior had been all alone before their family found him, how scared and hurt he had been, and how important it was to be kind to animals who couldn't speak for themselves. "Sometimes they can't tell you with words when they're hurt or scared," he said with the simple wisdom of childhood, "but they tell you in other ways if you really listen." The school visit was so successful that it led to a monthly program, with Warrior officially registered as a therapy dog in training. His calm demeanor with children and his visible physical differences, the slight limp, the scars that would never fully fade, made him an ideal ambassador for lessons about acceptance, perseverance, and compassion. By the 3-month mark after his rescue, Warrior had undergone a transformation that amazed everyone who had witnessed his journey. Though he would never regain full function in his injured leg, he had adapted remarkably, learning to distribute his weight effectively and developing compensatory strength in his other limbs. His coat had grown in thick and glossy with proper nutrition, the dull, matted fur of his stray days replaced by the healthy sheen of a well-cared-for pet. More remarkable still was the transformation in his spirit. The wary, pain-filled eyes that had first locked with Aiden's by the roadside now shone with alertness and, increasingly, joy. He had learned to play, tentatively at first, then with growing enthusiasm, particularly enjoying the gentle tug-of-war games Aiden devised that accommodated his limitations. "I never thought I'd see him jump," Marcus remarked one Saturday morning, watching through the kitchen window as Warrior made a small but deliberate leap to catch a soft toy Aiden had tossed. "Doctor, Patel said that might never be possible with his hip injury." "Determination and love are powerful medicine," Lucy replied, leaning against her husband's shoulder as they observed the pair in the backyard. "I'm not sure which one of them has transformed the other more." It was true that as much as Warrior had changed since joining their family, Aiden too had grown in remarkable ways. His natural empathy had deepened, his sense of responsibility had matured, and his ability to articulate complex emotional concepts had advanced beyond his years. His kindergarten teacher had commented on his exceptional ability to notice when other children were upset, and his instinctive offers of comfort, skills that seemed directly connected to his experience with Warrior. The ripple effects continued to spread outward. Through their work with Rescue Paws and the school program, the Collins family's story inspired community initiatives. A local business sponsored emergency medical care for strays, the town council improved funding for the animal control department, and a retired veterinarian started a mobile clinic to serve rural areas where access to pet care was limited. 3.5 months after the fateful Sunday drive, the Collins family received an invitation that brought their journey full circle. Rescue Paws was holding its annual fundraising gala, and they wanted Warrior and Aiden to be the guests of honor. It's a bit formal for a 5-year-old, Emily acknowledged when she called with the invitation. But your story has become the heart of our mission this year. The theme is the healing power of compassion, and we can't think of better embodiments of that concept than Aiden and Warrior. After some discussion, the family agreed to attend for a portion of the evening, long enough for Warrior and Aiden to make an appearance, but not so long that either would become overwhelmed by the formal setting and crowds. The night of the gala arrived on a crisp autumn evening, exactly 100 days after Warrior's rescue. Lucy had found Aiden a small suit that matched his father's, and even Warrior had been groomed and fitted with a special blue bandana emblazoned with the Rescue Paws logo. They arrived halfway through the cocktail hour, escorted through a side entrance to minimize stress for both child and dog. Emily met them in a quiet anteroom, adjacent to the main event space, her face lighting up at the sight of Warrior walking confidently beside Aiden, his gait showing only a subtle hitch that would likely be unnoticeable to those who hadn't known him in the early days of his recovery. "You both look very handsome," she told them, kneeling to greet Warrior with a gentle pat and Aiden with a high five. "There are a lot of people excited to meet you, but we won't stay too long, okay?" Aiden nodded seriously. He had been prepared for this event, understanding that he and Warrior were helping raise money for other animals in need. "Warrior says he's ready," he reported with characteristic certainty about the dog's thoughts. The family's entrance to the main ballroom was met with spontaneous applause as the MC announced them. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Warrior, Aiden Collins, and the Collins family, the inspiration behind tonight's record-breaking fundraising total." A path cleared through the elegantly dressed crowd as they made their way to the small stage. Warrior stayed perfectly in step with Aiden, showing none of the anxiety they had worried might emerge in such an overwhelming environment. If anything, the shepherd seemed to recognize the significance of the moment, carrying himself with a dignity that belied his traumatic past. Emily joined them on stage, where a child-height microphone had been set up. "Tonight, we've raised over $200,000 for emergency medical care for injured strays, more than double our previous record," she announced to renewed applause. And it all began because a 5-year-old boy heard a cry that adults couldn't hear and insisted on stopping to help. She knelt beside Aiden. "Would you like to say a few words about Warrior?" Aiden hadn't prepared a speech, but as he looked out at the expectant faces and then down at Warrior, standing faithfully by his side, the words came naturally. "Warrior was really hurt and really scared when we found him," he began, his clear voice carrying across the suddenly hushed room. "Nobody wanted him, and lots of cars just drove past and didn't stop to help." He placed his small hand on Warrior's head, drawing visible strength from the contact. But he never gave up. Even when the doctors said he might not make it, he kept fighting. The crowd remained utterly silent, many eyes glistening with unshed tears as the child continued. "Now he helps other kids learn about being kind to animals," Aiden explained with pride. "And even though his leg still hurts sometimes, he doesn't let it stop him from playing and being happy." He paused, seeming to search for the right words to conclude. "I think when someone's hurting, they just need you to stay with them and not leave them alone. That's what Warrior needed, and that's what all the other dogs need too." The simplicity and profound truth of this statement hung in the air for a moment before the room erupted in emotional applause. Lucy wiped tears from her eyes as Marcus placed a supportive hand on his son's shoulder. Warrior, sensing the heightened emotion, pressed himself closer to Aiden's side. In that moment, surrounded by hundreds of people moved by their story, the bond between boy and dog was as palpable as it had been in the private moments of rehabilitation at home. A connection that had begun with an act of pure compassion and grown into something that touched countless lives beyond their own. Later that evening, as they drove home with a sleepy Aiden and a contented Warrior in the back seat, Lucy turned to Marcus. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't stopped that day?" she asked quietly. Marcus glanced in the rearview mirror at their son, now fast asleep with his arm draped over Warrior's neck, the dog keeping faithful watch even as the child slumbered. "I try not to," he admitted, "but I'm grateful every day that we did." "Some people might call it chance," Lucy mused, "but I think it was something more. Something brought them together." Marcus nodded, remembering Aiden's insistence that he had heard crying when neither adult could detect a sound. "Whatever it was, I think we were just the supporting characters in their story," he said with a smile. "We may have provided the car and the credit card, But the real miracle was between those two. As the SUV turned onto their street, Warrior lifted his head from his resting position, looking out at the familiar surroundings of the neighborhood he now called home. In the soft glow of the dashboard lights, his eyes reflected not the fear and pain of his past, but the security and love of his present, a transformation so complete that it continued to astonish those privileged to witness it. One small decision to stop the car. Lucy repeated her earlier observation, reaching back to stroke Warrior's ear, and look at all that came from it. The German Shepherd leaned into her touch before settling back against Aiden's sleeping form, the guardian and the guarded, roles that had shifted and blended until it was impossible to say who had saved whom. 3 months ago, a broken dog lay dying beside a highway while cars sped past. Today, that same dog had helped raise funds to save countless others, had brought a community together in compassion, and had formed an unbreakable bond with a child who somehow heard his cry when no one else could. A reminder that sometimes the most profound connections begin with the simple decision to stop and listen when others keep driving by. If you were touched by Warrior and Aiden's story, please like, share, and subscribe to hear more incredible tales of hope and compassion. Let us know in the comments if you've ever experienced a special connection with an animal that changed your life.